A plague island. Oh,
Yeah,
why a plague island?
all of our borders are shut,
Oh my.
pretty much nobody or nothing coming in and out. We've
Mhm.
just left the European Union. So, yeah. Sorry, did you say why?
Yeah, well, I was like, weren't there elections recently
Yeah.
in the
We're
UK?
to, yeah, the Brexit
Brexit. Yeah.
disaster, where 52% wanted to leave the European Union, just 2% more than the rest of us.
What does that mean politically for the UK?
Means a lot of the trade deals are gone. It means a lot of traveling without visas is now gone for us. Um, for people who working abroad is a lot more difficult now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's movement and trade are the two big things, but also just it just kind of amplifies the xenophobia that
I
is rife in the UK.
I was gonna ask about that. What does that mean? I'm very curious. So I was in London last year around this time actually, about a year
Oh,
ago, this time exact. I didn't leave till like the end of January.
oh,
Um, I think I caught COVID out there.
oh no, I'm sorry.
I mean, it happened. I mean, it happens. I thought it was at the time. It was the worst upper respiratory infection I've ever had in my life. But
Oh,
I look back at all the symptoms and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I had COVID when I was in the UK. I mean, I was going,
no.
at all these museums and everything, just walking around and pretty sure. But the interesting part about the trip and my favorite part is that I spoke to a Jamaican brother named Richard, and he was telling me what it was like to be, I don't know, if, an immigrant, like from Jamaica to the UK. What do these sanctions or this does this vote for Brexit mean for a lot of immigrants in the UK?
Gosh, there's so much racism and xenophobia. And I think immigrants now, I think you can't actually stay in the UK for longer than a holiday unless you've got a job that earns more than, oh gosh, was it £35,000? About
Wow,
$30,000.
that's
If
class.
you, oh yes, absolutely. Um, but it's just that's what the UK has always been. It's not a new thing at all. You know, when they need the help of immigrants, like after the Second World War, when a load of people from the Caribbean came to the UK and were working as pretty much key workers, like a lot of nurses, a lot of medical staff, in factories, in
Mhm.
construction, in transport, massive, and there still is a massive presence of Afro-Caribbean people in these industries. You know, when it was after the Second World War, it's like, yep, come here, bring your kids, everything's be great. And they did. And of course, a couple of years ago, suddenly the Windrush, it's called the Windrush scandal.
Mhm.
The Windrush was the ship that brought the first sort of wave of modern black immigrants
Mhm.
to the UK. And suddenly it was, unless you can show your papers that we gave you 50 years ago, then you're out. And your kids are also out. And it doesn't matter if you're disabled or have life threatening illnesses or your children have never known anywhere other than the UK.
Mhm.
That's it, sling your hook, you're out.
That
And
is.
I think it was just maybe a month ago when they were still deporting people to Jamaica. They was, you know, it's still an ongoing thing. It's absolutely disgusting. And I love this country. I love the UK and I'm proud to be British. But it absolutely stinks the way we treat the way white British people, actually, the way white British people and non-black people of colour who are British, how they treat anybody they see beneath them. It's
Yeah.
just absolutely shocking. But this is a beautiful country with beautiful scenery and locations, and outside of London, in my experience, it's incredibly friendly and welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
But the people in control and the people with the influence, they don't like that at all. Regular working class people of all ethnicities in the UK are pretty easygoing, but they just picked people in control, governments and councils. They pit people against each other. So a lot of the things about Brexit was, those Eastern European people are going to come over here and work for half of your wages, and so you'll get kicked out of a job and they'll get it. And yeah, there was a lot of that, but there was also a lot of things that sort of encouraged the Windrush scandal to just kick up a notch as well. And it's just all disgusting.
Oh, I feel like this, wow. I feel like we're gonna cook up a lot in this episode. I'm really interested in your perspective, especially being across the pond. Let me start this properly. Hi everyone. I'm Mimi Tempestt, and this is another episode of Black.Queer.Alive. We're in season 3, and I'm here with Jacq. Yeah. Jacq is from the UK. And Jacq, I remember reading your response to the forum, and I'm so excited to talk about the zines that you make, the activist work that you do. You already sound, or you already have broke down so many things that I think a lot of people need to know about how racism works, not only here in America, but like on an international scale. Um,
Boy.
I was most interested in your response because you mentioned about alienation, like wanting to feel like you're a part of a community. So I welcome you to my community, the Black.Queer.Alive community. Thank you
Thank you.
for being open and willing to share your story. Um, let's kick it off, even though it's been kicked off. Yeah, you came out. I was like, yes. Tell me your age, what you're passionate about, and what motivates you.
Wow. I'm 51. What what I'm passionate about?
What you're
Um,
passionate.
I'm passionate about justice. Really, I'm passionate about not about people being included, about intersectionality. I'm passionate about people seeing problems and issues as rarely something that's just a UK or a US thing. I spent most of the summer trying to convince white British people and non-Black British people of colour that racism isn't just a US only thing. And it really, and there'll be so many of them who would be saying, gosh, isn't it great that we live in a UK where things like that don't happen? I'll be like, bitch, please.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not usually sweary, but it was just, for goodness sake. Yes, we don't have many police officers with guns in the UK, but we have a thing called deaths in custody,
What's that?
which it's when they take they arrest you for whatever, stealing an apple, bumping into the wrong person, driving without a rear headlight, and you go into custody in a police cell and you don't come out. And that is a thing that's been big since I was a kid. There's in London, there's a pretty famous police station, Stoke Newington Police Station, and when I was younger with my very unpleasant family, and we'd be driving past, they'd always point and say, "That's the place you never come out of. Black person goes in there, they ain't coming out. They are not coming out." So yes, trying to make people more aware that the UK isn't innocent, and that's a hashtag that's kind of trending now. And lately there's been, I know it's not part of the UK, but Ireland isn't innocent as well. Just a couple of days ago, I think it was, George Nadenko, I hope I'm saying his surname right, but he was a Black man in Dublin who had mental health conditions, and he was in front of his own home and in front of his own family when the Irish police, called the Gardaí, they shot him. He was wielding a knife, and they shot him and he died. It's very rare for the Gardaí to carry guns, and they've got a special part of them who's actually armed, and that's an absolutely terrible thing. People with mental health conditions already get demonized. Black people get demonized as being, especially fat Black men or big Black men, demonized as being dangerous and inherently violent. But just a few months before that, there was a white Irish man who sadly killed his whole family and had a knife on him, but he was arrested and taken into custody and he's alive. There was, a little while ago, there was another white Irish man who used one of the police officers' own guns to, actually tackled it off him. He was still taken in alive, and he's still alive now. But a Black person with a mental health condition going into his own home and sounding off and waving a knife about, who's clearly having massive problems, shot and killed. So the UK and Ireland and Europe and the world is not innocent. White supremacy exists wherever people exist. And that's something I'm really passionate about. And it feeds into so much of what I do and so many parts of my identity, because, a lot of people see me as bottom of the barrel kind of stuff. I'm Black, I'm fat, I'm bisexual. I've got disabilities, including several mental health disabilities. I don't have a family. I actually ran away from my very violent and abusive family. 27 years ago, 28 years ago, I think. All of those things contribute to how people view me. And that includes people who are Black and people who are LGBT as well. And that's why nowadays I use the word alienation and not isolation. It's not me choosing to be on my own. It's being actively pushed out, actively made to feel unwelcome in Black spaces, in Black straight spaces, in queer Black spaces, in queer white spaces, in white, it feels like, there's just nowhere for me. And I saw that one of your questions was it, where do you find home?
Where do you find home? I play with that question with when do you feel safe? Because I feel like those questions they reflect a need, a need for stability that I think a lot of Black queer and folks may or may not get. So I'm interested, how would you respond to where do you find home?
Right here. That's the only place. That is the absolute only place.
Yeah. You mentioned a lot.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But I gotta just stay on my toes. I appreciate it. What do you do to take care of yourself in the midst of all of this? Like how do you prioritize your I feel like that's the wrong word. I'm thinking out loud. How do you prioritize your feeling well, like your well-being?
It's tricky. It really is tricky. Taking social media breaks is a big one. Not reading the newspapers or watching the news on TV. I haven't done that for years. When big enough things happen, you end up hearing about it
and
sooner or later. But those are two big things. But it's really difficult, and honestly, it's a battle every day, because I grew I grew up and spent much of my life in very unhealthy ways of coping, and to kind of break out of that and not drink when things are too much. It's really hard to do that. It's really hard to just look after myself, to take my medication on time, to I'm type 2 diabetic. So yeah, to be able to do all of that, care about that, test my blood, it's a daily kind of thing, and it's knackering, it's tiring, but it's also just, it's really, really difficult. And sadly, a lot of times I feel like I'm not worth the effort, and it's something that I'm trying to unlearn as time goes on. But it's so difficult after spending decades, and especially the formative years, of being told that I'm not worth anything. It's really hard to unlearn all of that. It's an ongoing thing, and sometimes I don't feel it, but I know that I've come a long way as well with all of that.
Do you have, are there one or two people, like a small community that you really reflect with, hang out with, love in? What does that look like for you?
Hmm. Uh, I do have friends, but for some reason they're all in South London,
Okay.
flipping miles away. Since quarantine, it's been incredibly difficult, because all of my friends have health issues, physical and mental health issues, that make it really, really difficult for them to get out. Even when things were a bit more relaxed in the summer, you know, I still couldn't visit my friends who live in Brixton and Charlton and places in South London. Sorry, I'm in Northeast London,
What part?
and London's a big place, and it's, you know, it takes me at least an hour to get to the closest friend of mine on public transport. So yeah, it's really difficult for all of us. But you know, we have the Zoom things and Skype. Um, but yeah, I do have friends, and they're all bisexual. Most of them are non-binary. People that I'd first met at BICON, which is a place I used to go to. It's the longest running bisexual event in the world. It's been going, gosh, it must be about 30, 35 years now that it's been going on. So these are, before I stopped going there, I made these friends, and we've been able to stay friends ever since.
What's your experience in being bisexual? I too am bisexual, pansexual. Depends. What's your experience like?
Isolating,
Okay.
and yeah, well, I just, alienating, really. It's isolating, as in the UK bisexual communities are all over the UK, and it's, you know, hopping on a train and traveling several hours to go and see someone it's tricky when you're not working, and train fares expensive and you don't drive. But alienating, because it's still pretty small, it's incredibly white, hell of a lot of racism, and the LGBT communities in the UK, or the LGGG communities in the UK, are
Gay?
biphobic as,
Okay.
yeah. That's part of the reason why myself and a couple of friends started off Bisexuals of Colour 10 years ago. Oh, it'll be 11 years in August. Anyway, it's there was just no place for us, and places that should have been safer ended up being really racist and abusive and just toxic to us.
Yeah, I I can relate to some of that. I feel like being fluid and bisexual, a lot of people, one, are very thrown off or confused, you know, like that. Even in the LGBTQ plus community, they don't they it's as if it's like the queers of the queers. They can't box us, and as a result, they kind of just like dismiss or make fun or say, well, you're really gay, or you're really just a stop away from being gay. So it is very frustrating to be a bisexual person, especially a black bisexual person. Uh, mm, how,
I kind of not partially disagree with what you said about they can't box us, put us in boxes and all, because a lot of them don't want to. A lot of them have a lot of very overt hate towards bisexual people, especially in my experience, some of the worst stuff has come from white gay men and black lesbian women.
mm,
That's where the worst stuff has come from. And it's just really disappointing. Well, it's really heartbreaking, really. They know they're not, they weren't born yesterday. They've got the same influences and access to information that we have, but they don't want to. It's it's a horrible mix of racism and biphobia and a lot of misogyny as well. It's a terrible mixture.
most definitely. What are you searching for?
The next jar of peanut butter. I'm a bit of a peanut butter fiend. I've actually written a zine on peanut butter.
Why
Yeah.
peanut butter? Do you know, like where
Peanut butter and tofu are my two favorite foods. And yeah, it's peanut butter, especially, is comfort food. You can just have it straight out of a jar. When I was growing up, there was only two kinds, smooth and crunchy sun-packed peanut butter. But nowadays, oh, it's the future. There's a company called Nut Butter London,
Hmm.
and
What are they?
they've got cardamom and rose peanut butter. Oh, it's fantastic.
Oh, I want to try.
Oh yeah, it's yeah. So in my zine, it's kind of, I've got recipes which are all vegan and gluten free. I've got poems about peanut butter. I've got like made up history of peanut butter, of like, for example, 1884, cholera hits England, but people eat peanut butter and are magically better. Or peanut butter leads tribe across the frozen Arctic waste, saving people and creating the First Nations of America. Just stupid things like that. I don't think I actually said about the First Nations because that would be disrespectful, but silly things like, yeah, peanut butter stops the civil war in the UK and
Ends world hunger. Can you tell me a little bit about your zines?
yeah, I've been making zines since Christmas Day 2014, and I remember that day I was supposed to be taken out for a meal, and I got stood up. So after waiting in the bloody cold for ages. Anyway, I'm not bitter, really.
Not at all.
4 years later, and I'm not bitter, but yeah, I got really angry and I started just getting a pen and paper and scribbling out stuff. Christmas and birthdays are always difficult for me. Christmas is especially, not having a family. It's really rammed down your throat. Christmas is for families, and you're all sitting around a fire, and it's suddenly 1885, and
Right.
Yeah, there's all these mince pies and Christmas puds, and but people buy into it massively. And being a survivor of abuse and an ex-runaway, to not have that um, illusion, that fantasy, it still hurts. Christmas is also a trauma anniversary
Most definitely.
for um, for a lot of stuff. But one thing, act of cruelty that I've still got scars of
Mm,
nowadays. And because it didn't happen on, I don't know, February the 16th or something, just some innocuous day. It happened on Christmas Day, the day that you can't help but remember because the whole flipping world is
yeah.
saying, yeah.
Ah.
So Christmas is difficult for me. So I wrote about that, and the title of the zine was That Doesn't Happen to Black Kids.
Oh,
And that's actually something a black guy said to me once when I was talking about being a survivor of abuse. And I'd gone into some detail, but he still turned around and said, That doesn't happen to black kids. And I just thought, have you not listened to me for the last 15 minutes? I've been jabbering on
mm,
about my experiences. Um, but yeah, there's very few resources that I've seen um, that actually addresses how things are different for Black survivors, um, what recovery looks like for us. It's all recovery in being a survivor is often seen through a very white lens. Uh, and I mean, all pretty much all disabilities are seen through a white lens. But when it comes to mental health disabilities, it's a complete blizzard. White, 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 white.
yeah.
Um, it's it's really difficult, and I wrote about that in the zine. And the zine is free. It's on my. It's if you follow a link on my Instagram page, I've got several zines that are free that you can just look at.
I'll make sure on the website, when I link your information, that I put that link for folks to check out.
Yeah, thank you. But the zines have been it's been great in a way. I mean, people sometimes say writing is cheaper than therapy, but sometimes it's true. To be able to give voice or to express things that I haven't seen before, that no one, it feels like no one talks about, like running away from home as an adult.
Mhm.
There's absolutely no information I could find beforehand about that. It was everything was aimed at teenagers and white straight teenagers at that. And yes, of course, they need massive amounts of support because sadly there's a lot of exploitation out there. But white straight teenagers aren't the only ones who need to escape from violent, abusive, life-threatening situations, and who, like me, can find very little help, real-time help to get away and stay away. So I, gosh, that was the zine's called Get Lost,
Get lost. Got
a
it.
zine for running away, and it was actually used and as a resource on uh, by an organisation, a charity called Neuro Triage, and they help homeless people with mental health issues that come from traumatic head injuries. That's the main part, but also just general traumatic mental health issues. Sometimes it's caused by alcoholism. Um, Being homeless can be incredibly violent and incredibly dangerous. So there is a definite kind of cause and effect of being homeless and having mental health issues. So Neuro Triage, they actually used that zine on their website.
Mm,
And I've spoken at a couple of their events as well, um, about that, because it's not talked about at all.
mm. That's, I think that's very important work for sure. For sure. Um, are there any other organizations that you are affiliated with or have worked with in the past?
worked with the British Psychological Society. That was interesting. It was great to be able to talk about things again, to give a talk in front of a couple hundred people at one of their conferences. You know, that was pretty special because like I have selective mutism, and as a child, my voice completely went. It was literally beaten out of me. So
just for clarification, what is selective mutism?
It's a mental health illness that it can be where somebody is unable to speak, and sometimes that can last a couple hours or a couple years, which is what happened in my case. And it's usually based because of trauma. It's, you know, sometimes like a very mild thing would be when someone's so scared they can't speak. You know, that's something that might happen to lots of people. Part of the 5 reactions to trauma, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and flop, is what the UK versions are. That's part of the freeze one, where your breath is literally just frozen in place. So even though the trauma may pass, it's still when there's very, intense situations where my voice can go. It's kind of linked to anxiety a bit as well, but not quite. So to be able to speak in front of a couple hundred people, you know, all of them psychologists, all of them white, I felt proud of myself then. And I was really glad to be able to do it, because these people, honestly, I used to work as a secretary at a university department that trained psychology, clinical psychologists, and they have to study for flipping years. Not one of them know about how the psychology in Black people. Very few of them know about psychology in LGBT people. But they're so clueless, and you just think, what the hell were you studying for 5 or so years? What the hell were you doing playing Candy Crush when you should have been looking at how mental health and Blackness and racism go together like that?
I appreciate you for that response, because I mean, a part of why I created Black.Queer.Alive is I wanted this to be an archive. Eventually over time, like it is an opportunity to, in the moment, get to listen to a variance of stories, expressions of Black and queerness. But as I started growing this and talking with more people, I said, wow, I wonder if people from 100 years from now could look at this body of work and create some type of scientific or just like social experiment, I guess is the word, to see if there's any correlations to how we are seeing and experiencing the world. It's a dream of mine. But I think, what was that?
It's incredibly important, because we get erased from history left, right, and center. Stuff that happened a couple years back, people will still try and say, Black people, queer people, they didn't get involved with that. They weren't there. They didn't exist at the time. None on record. I mean, I know it's the Stonewall riots were in 1969, the year that I was born. And even I knew about, oh my God, Marsha
P. Johnson.
Yeah, I knew about them and the Black queer sex workers who said no to the police. But a couple of years back, or maybe it's more, there was that stupid piece of rubbish. Sorry. If I start talking in patois, you know to leave the room.
Okay.
that, yes, where there was a film out where it was a white gay man who threw the first brick, and I don't know if it was just there. Was it called Stonewall or something else?
Stonewall. It was like it was a
Oh,
big erasure of the actual Stonewall riots, which was started by a Black trans woman and a Black Latinx trans woman. Like, you know, between Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, they were, yeah,
yeah.
they were the
So,
they spearheaded that riot and spearheaded that movement, which was co-opted eventually by white gay people.
oh yeah. So yeah, Dowley raised us left, right, and centre. So thank you for what you're doing.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your story. Who's the first, speaking of like trailblazers or historians, who's the first person that you saw or heard or read about that really that you felt influenced you, or who you felt connected to?
Wow. Yeah, it's a difficult one. Gosh, I remember hearing about like pop singers who are bisexual and not knowing what that word meant, and sort of thinking, oh, okay. I didn't come out until I was 22. Yeah, until I was or 23. But just hearing about that and hearing about people like David Bowie and gosh, like from Adam and the Ants. I don't know if you remember
I don't think
that.
I.
Um, but also Tom Robinson, who I actually was able to meet a couple years ago. He had the song "Sing If You're Glad to Be Gay."
Oh, okay.
That was really huge in the UK. Yeah, I was able to meet him, and he gives the best hugs. I was like, oh God, I love your music. Can I hug you, please? It was great. It was like being hugged by a giant teddy bear. And yeah, it was at the LGBT awards and vodka tasting event, which was just ridiculous. But I was out on the balcony, and it was just me, and I got chatting to this guy, and I thought, oh shit, this is Tom Robinson. And yeah, that was lovely. But yeah, a lot of LGBT events, yeah, they're just lesbian, gay, 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 gay. They're usually completely white, and they're usually boozed up to the gills. And if you're a recovering alcoholic like myself, not the best place to be. But yeah, yeah.
I'm
I've completely forgotten what your initial question.
okay. The first person, it's okay. The first person you felt connected to, and you said Tom Rob. Well, you said a lot of folks, but the story about Tom Robinson.
Yeah. But I also grew up in a very intolerant and abusive and violent place, and anything out of a very strict set of ways to be, it was just completely slandered. So I didn't get much exposure. And also, you know, being born in 1969 and like on in the 70s and early 80s, you just didn't see or hear much in the UK because it was a lot. Yeah, it wasn't that there were not many influences. It's just that things were very censored,
Very,
um, very regulated. Yeah, and then in the mid 80s, there came the whole thing about Section 28, which was just a terrible thing. And it's where the government, flipping Thatcher, said,
how much of you think of this was influenced by Margaret Thatcher?
oh, a lot. Bloody hell, it was terrible. It was absolutely terrible that schools weren't allowed to promote homosexuality. They weren't allowed to promote relationships beyond a man and man and a woman. So that's polyamorous out the back door.
In school, yeah, in school,
Yeah.
they promote really. Are they supposed to promote sexual relationships, or Really?
It was just ridiculous. It was so ridiculous. It's like they never mentioned queerness or anything when I was going to school. And this was about the time when I was just leaving um, secondary education, senior schools. But it was just disgusting, you know. And I didn't have strong feelings, you know, much about my own sexuality, but I did know one gay man, and I thought, if people were treating him like that, it's just terrible. This is wrong. You know, I knew that it was wrong. And a really heartbreaking thing for me was where I lived in North London at the time. It's a very black working class area. Oh, and it just makes me shudder whenever I think about that area. But it was the only time when the black churches and the far right hate group called the National Front, the only time they ever agreed and joined forces was to make sure Section 28 stayed. And it was just like, even now, like, goodness knows, 40 odd years later, and it's just like, I need to wash, I need a shower to get that disgustingness off. I mean, I do want to say that I am a Christian, but the Christianity, the faith that I feel and practice is miles away from the black churches where I grew up, where it was more about some kind of time machine back to Jamaica in the 1950s than it was about loving God. It was a very strict, women must do this, men must do this, you will not open your mouth in church kind of thing.
That's so
And yeah, a place that could do a lot of good, and it just,
yeah.
yeah.
I'm gonna pivot a little bit. When's the first time you realized you were Black?
At infant school when I was about 6 or 7, no, 6, and uh, a little girl, a little white girl, sort of offered me a biscuit, and I said, "Oh, thank you." And there was a group of black, there was another group, but you know, there was black kids. Said, "Oh, she's taking food from a white girl," and that's when it of course I noticed differences in people's skins and everything like that, but that's when it really struck me. It was one of the first times. I know that there's been others, but that was something, and that was like the first time I got called a coconut
What?
as well. Like, I think in Americans it's Oreo.
Yeah, we call it Oreos. I
Yeah.
was gonna say, what's wrong? I don't know what's wrong with taking a biscuit from a white girl. I mean, not that I don't.
None of it makes sense
Okay,
unless you're, you know, unless you're a bigoted creep. It doesn't make sense.
what is your relationship with others in the Black community, straight or gay, or what is your?
Not much at all. Not much. Sadly, apart from the people who are part of bisexuals of colour, um, yeah, not much at all. Where I live in East London, it's very multicultural, big South Asian community, lots of white working class people, and uh, it's a smaller amount of black people, like Afro-Caribbean people, but there's still, you know, enough of a presence, and they're very, very family orientated. And that's even if you're queer, very, very family orientated. And if you don't have a family, you're like yeah, get away from me.
I got that impression when I was out there as well. Like everyone was very obsessed with being coupled. Like I have a boyfriend, I have a girlfriend, these are my children. You know, like
Yeah. And
uh,
it's that I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. If they've got families and kids, that's fantastic, you know, and they love each other. But
on my throat, if that makes sense.
I'm sorry.
it felt like it was being like shoved down my throat.
Oh,
This
yeah.
nuclear family, this obsession with coupling, with like marriage. I felt like I heard so much about marriage while I was in the UK, and I was like, I know it's here in the US, but I don't. I like it, it's as if it's like a badge of honor.
Absolutely.
I didn't.
Absolutely. To be perceived as a woman and not have children. Yeah, I was unable to have children. Um, but it really was, yeah, that's also another time when I get called, you're not a proper black.
Oh, when
That's another way of, well, it's not the same as coconut, but it's, yeah, you don't qualify. And I've heard that my entire life. And I
mm,
think the last time I heard it was only a couple months ago.
mm.
Yeah, you're not a proper black.
You know, it's interesting that you say that. I too have been experiencing, I would, you know, I haven't talked about this publicly, but I'll share it with you. Um, I've been experiencing some reproductive concerns as well. I don't, I haven't reached a conclusion yet if I'm infertile, but that's been weighing on me a lot lately, and what that means to my construction. I wouldn't say, well, I mean, as a black woman or black femme, and how that perception of having reproductive concerns influences how people, like, you know, how especially being bisexual, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, I could empathize so much. It's like you're only good for one thing and you can't do that. It's like, oh God, I just said it in like my dad's voice then. I do apologize, but it's, yeah, you know, because we're only supposed to be good on our backs. That's what we're good for, you
Yeah.
know, and if you can't do that, what good are you?
Right. I have this poem. It's one of my favorite lines of the poem. Is I say the N word a lot, so excuse me. It says, "The nigga that needs to read this branded me as a nigga making machine." I just feel, um, you know, reproductive concerns, infertility brings up a lot about the state of our humanity
Yes. Yeah.
and what that means, but also it gives me, you know, like I said, I haven't reached a conclusion, or the doctors haven't reached a conclusion, but it gives me, I don't know, for me, it gives me space to imagine and dream and reconstruct against all these notions, right? The ones that we hear from our fathers, the ones that we hear from our communities, to re-envision my humanity, you know, outside of being, you know,
Yeah.
a machine.
It took me a long time. I mean, I never quite identified as a woman my whole life, really. I never quite felt it. And also just being told you're not a proper X, you're not Y. But when I had fibroids, and they were like 7 pound fibroids,
Wow.
several of them, yeah, big old ones. And to get them removed meant to also remove my uterus and my cervix. And for someone who never really felt much of a woman, it was like devastating to me. It's like, I'll never be a woman now. Even though I didn't really feel like it beforehand, but it really was like, that's, you know, the lid on the coffin. Yeah, and it's just, okay, so I'm even more deficient now than I was before. There was a lot of self-hatred, but out of that came more of a embracing my non-binary. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's just coming up for me, and I appreciate you sharing your story.
um yeah, when I still had a job, it was great to be able to be openly, I was openly everything, openly polyamorous. I was openly bisexual. I was the trade union bisexual rep at the last place I worked. And I was openly non-binary, you know, instead of Jacqueline or Jackie, please call me Jacq.
Okay.
And, you know, yeah, I got the, oh, hi, Jacq. You're going to steal something now? Oh,
Mm.
ha, ha, bloody ha. But that was great to be able to be out in that way. And it's something that stayed with me as a really positive thing. And it's part of it. It might sound like I'm sidetracking, but it's part of it. But one of the mental health diagnoses I have is dissociative identity disorder.
Can you clarify what that one, what that means?
Sure. The old ableist word for it was multiple personality disorder, but they changed the name pretty much worldwide for that. And it's directly from a violent and repeated abuse
I was gonna say, isn't that
before,
trauma induced
before,
as well? That
I'm
that
sorry, you keep cutting out.
I'm sorry. It doesn't that diagnosis, isn't that triggered from trauma as well?
For the most part, there are some people who do have it who may have lived through war or through seeing parents or some loved ones die or in a very bad situation. But I think for like 90 odd percent, it's from intense and repeated, the repeated bit's really important, abuse of some kind before the age of 8, before
Mm.
your brain actually is able to set up properly, really. And one of the big things of it is of the creation of alternate personalities inside you. And I have 6 alter personalities, or just alters for short. There are some people who have 2. It still qualifies. You know, if you've got more than one personality, it still qualifies in the UK as that. And there are some people who have what they call in their own words an army of alters. There was recently a woman in Australia who was able to bring her major abuser to court, and actually he's in prison now, but she said, I've got an army of me. And they actually listened and believed her, which was fantastic. But yeah, most people don't really know what dissociative identity disorder, and when you do say the word multiple personality disorder, it's, oh,
I'm
that means crazy person, or, oh, I watched Split and that, I know what that's all about. And you just think, oh God. So anyway, 6 alters, 3 of them are male and 3 are female. So it was really nice in a way to be able to kind of accept them more and express, be able to let them come out more. I mean, they come out whenever they want to, but the more male parts of like Larry and Howard to come out more, and my voice will change, my mannerisms will change, my vocabulary will change, to have that and know that I'm non-binary, and that's a really positive part of me. And that's
may I ask more questions about this? Okay.
sure.
Wow. I'm one of those people, instead of going back, I'm like, I edge in. Like, I would love to know about this. I think human psychology is so interesting. So you said you have 6,
Yeah.
and mannerisms change, and Mike, okay, a lot of questions coming to my mind. Um, do you know what usually triggers the transition between the different personalities or identities?
Some when different situations will trigger different personalities. And I said there was 3 male and 3 female. It's actually 4 female.
Okay.
One's a bit kind of ambiguous, but and 2 male. But when it comes to very stressful, immediate danger situations, and what might be immediate danger to me might just be everyday to somebody else.
Hmm.
But Lizzie or Forest Jacq will come out then, and those Forest Jacq in particular is the one that's complete, well, it was pretty much mute all of the time. She came up with her own kind of sign language that sometimes I'll wake up or find myself signing my own sign language. It's not British Sign Language or any other recognizable one, but it's, when your voice goes for a couple of years, you have to work out how to communicate. But sometimes it's just like smells. Sometimes there's a particular thing with shadow, the oldest kind of ambiguous.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I was going to ask, if you feel comfortable, please let me know if this is too much at any point. What are the names of your different identities?
Sure. The youngest one is Lizzie. The second eldest is Forest Jacq, girl. Then there's Larry, teenage boy, who's white. There's Monroe, a very 1980s kind of feel to her, black girl. There's Howard, who's sort of like middle-aged, a bit, in my mind, I always see him as a kind of Mediterranean, Middle Eastern kind of guy. And Shadow, who's sometimes feels like a ghost, or sometimes an elderly Caribbean woman. And she comes out when talking in plural sometimes happens when they're all suddenly coming up to the surface, almost like looking, who's talking about us? But in a positive way, a positive, not defensive way. But yeah, when I cook, I don't often cook West Indian food because it just has a lot of baggage for me. But when I eat West Indian, when I do, suddenly it's like, oh, hello, Shadow's here. And it's like she's got her needs met of like having food that she recognizes. And then suddenly she's out and chatting or doing her thing. And that's always really interesting. But I really don't like West Indian food.
This is my last question in this realm. I don't want to pick and prod too much, but I'm slightly curious. Wait, I had the question, then I left. Wow, I had it and then it bounced. That's okay.
If it comes back, that's fine to ask as well.
Okay. Thank you. I'm gonna pivot again. When's the first time you realized you were queer?
Oh, that's a great one. Big sci-fi fan. Was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation when it first came out in the UK, so very early 90s. And there was a shot of the bridge crew, and I thought, oh, blimey, I really fancy Picard and Riker and Troy and Tasha Yar and Beverly Crusher and Data and Worf. I was like, oh, okay, I think something's up here.
Oh, okay.
Everyone apart from Geordie and Wesley, because he's a wanker anyway. But yeah, he's anyway, won't go into that. Anyway, but yes, fancied like 8 people at the same time. And it was like, yeah, so I discussed it with my then boyfriend, and it felt like a really positive thing to have escaped from violent sexual abuse, to be able to have sexual feelings for all these people. It was fantastic. And like, I didn't have the word at the time, but I had polyamorous feelings since I was like 4 years old.
Wow.
But I knew this wasn't it. This was something different that I was feeling here. So it felt like a really positive thing. And the honeymoon didn't last long, because when I phoned up the lesbian and gay switchboard, and it was just lesbian and gay switchboard at the time, but I didn't know the different terminologies. And in people said, oh, there's nothing for bisexuals in England. You should try going to Scotland.
Oh, shit.
That was my first response. And 30 odd years later, and I'm still getting that kind of bullshit. You know, it's just absolutely disgusting. But at the time, it was just brilliant. It was brilliant. It's sad that it kind of ended so soon when people's bigotry came out, and I also realised there was nothing specific for bisexuals that I could find, and that was just before the internet became available in the UK. I mean, after I could find like the London Women's Bisexual Group, which was racist as get out, but you know, before the internet, it was incredibly hard. I didn't know where to look.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know where to find the information. So, but yeah, the Star Trek moment. That's still a big fan
I mean,
of
that's
Star Trek.
as a way to experience your queerness for the first time.
It was great.
I'm gonna pivot again. If you could talk to your 12-year-old self, what would you tell them?
Run away now. Do not wait. You put your shoes on, grab whatever you can, put it in your bag, and you run now. That would be to any part of any age of myself. And yeah, it's being homeless and street homeless and a runaway as an adult was incredibly hard. It was so much exploitation around. You know, I was able to stay in a homeless person's hostel for a bit, and I would have to lock my bedroom door, put a chair under the door. If I needed to go out to the bathroom because there wasn't toilets in the actual room, I would have to like be looking, is there anyone around? It was being black, being perceived as a woman, and homeless. You've got several targets on your back. And yeah, people want to offer you money if you do, you know, if you get down on your knees for them. People will call you all sorts of horrible names because you're homeless. I mean, homeless people get it anyway, but when you're homeless in a minority, it's much worse. And in the UK, you rarely see a woman on the street, like homeless, street homeless, visibly street homeless. You'll rarely see a black guy on the street as street homeless. You'll never see a woman of colour or a black woman street homeless, because you might as well say, here you go, here's a knife, please just stab me with that. It's so incredibly dangerous. But with all that being said, I would still tell 12-year-old me to run like hell, because all of that, what I just described, nothing compared to what I had to live with in my own home, with my own family. It's nothing compared to what they would do. And when a stranger does it, it's terrible. But when a family member does it and you have to go down to breakfast and sit next to them the next day, or you go to church with them, or just know that they're, you know, and it wasn't just one or two people. Sadly, I had a big family, and most of them were very, very violent and abusive, the men and the women too. It was, yeah. So I would still tell 12-year-old me to run.
Yeah. What do you want to hear from your 60-year-old self?
Gosh, 9 years' time. Uh, I want to hear, well done, Jacq, for winning the lottery and moving to the Maldives. That was great. Gosh, 60-year-old me. It's really hard for me to imagine a future. I never thought I'd live past 20. So to be 51 now, it's still a massive surprise to me. But I'd like to hear that that I can live in peace, that I can live closer to people who care about me. Yeah, that I can, that it will be 9 years since I had a drink or self harmed or anything like that. That would be nice.
How are you doing? You want to take a break real quick?
No, it's okay. I've got chocolate.
How do you experience love, Jacq?
With my whole body. It's hard to, it's strange. It's either hard for me to allow myself to feel love because I kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of thing. But also when I feel love, it's like never gonna let you go. It's like from one extreme to the other.
Mm.
And I think that might be the case for a lot of survivors of abuse. But yeah, to be able to sit with it, and unless it's coming from children, to be able to just say, yeah, this is okay. I don't have to be afraid.
Mm.
Sometimes I still am afraid. I've had a lot of heartbreak, and racism and violence gets into absolutely everything. But I still, yeah, I stopped identifying as polyamorous about 4 years ago now.
What made
It,
you, what made that transition?
the polyamorous community in the UK is like 97% white
Mm.
and very middle class, very like highly academic. And all the partners I'd had have been who were polyamorous were white. And racism ended every single one of those relationships.
Mm.
The two black guys I've ever dated, a trip to the casualty department ended those relationships. But with white people, there was a lot more, they were a lot more longer term. Excuse me. And yeah, racism gets into everything. And it's really, it's just, racism in relationships is absolutely awful. I mean, bigotry in relationships. I've been with shorter term, actually, no, I take it back. I've been with partners who, you know, loved my curves and my hips and my thighs and my boobs. And in the bedroom, outside, they wouldn't even like acknowledge me, wouldn't hold my hand, that kind of thing. But so bigotry in relationships is horrible, but racism as part of that bigotry, it's just absolutely terrible. Um, and when it goes with white fragility, like white women's fragility, oi, you know, if people manage to like not weaponize, make it into a energy source, you know, yeah, we're set for the next 1,000 years. It's just absolutely ridiculous how strong it is. Yeah, I could, yeah, yeah.
I,
So that's why I stopped. White people broke my heart, really, in the
mm,
most intimate of ways. And I just said, I can't do it anymore.
yeah. Yeah, I dated one black, not one black, I've dated several black, but I dated one white man a couple years ago. And that shit was, it turned so left so quick, and it was all about this person's power, like this weird, strange power dynamic that he was trying to really enforce on me. And I remember after that one time, I was like, I don't do white people. I was like, I'd rather be single. Um, uh,
Yeah, I've always said there's much worse things than being alone.
Most definitely.
Really.
But also, something that you said really sat with me, that the idea of being fetishized. I've never liked that either. You like me in bed, but outside, it's like,
Mm.
do you really like me as a human? Do you see me as a human being? I think fetishization is like my biggest turn off when it comes to dating people. It's the biggest.
Yeah, it's yeah. If I was charging for it and it was a source of income, fine. My heart wouldn't be involved with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, when it's when it's when somebody refuses to hold your hand when you're outside, it's just, and it's such a small thing, really, for most people, but absolutely heartbreaking. But being a survivor, I sort of think, oh, well, I'm not really worth it anyway.
You're worth
You
it.
internalize so much. My very last partner I had, um, the one that just tipped me over the edge of that's it, no more being polyamorous, was gosh, she's a academic doctor. I think she might be a professor now,
Mm.
and she would get into tears. I don't know what's really racist and what isn't. And oh, sooner or later, you're going to call me racist too. And I just realized I was hand holding so much to reassure her. And then in the end, she ended up sort of telling the rest of the white bisexual community that I'd been violent
With
to her. Yeah, violent in a public space, that I'd shouted at her and everything. And it's like, unless a child is running towards a car, speeding car, I don't raise my voice at anybody. It's, it's hard enough to just talk normally. But anyway, that was one of the things that really got to me. Is like, I never shout, but the amount of people who believed her and cut me off, it was just staggering. It was absolutely staggering. It was a white fragility,
yeah,
the outright lying, the reverse racism. It was just pile upon pile upon pile.
like no more. I see.
Yeah.
I see.
And I don't really have much of an option of not dating white people because there's so few black polyamorous people um, out there, um, to be able to even meet and correspond with online. Is if I want to meet a black polyamorous people for a relationship, or even like a one night stand or something like that, I have to look in the US. And yeah, phone sex is great and cam sex is just dandy, but for me, it's not sustainable.
Yeah. Touch is important. Intimacy is important, even in polyamory situation setups. Mm. If you could change your identity, would you? And it's kind of a
Oh,
funny question at this point.
no, no, it's when I saw that on your list, I was like, oh shit. It's that
um,
so loaded for
yeah,
me.
yeah, I didn't anticipate that, but I've switched this question a little bit, and you can choose to be a hummingbird, a red oak sequoia tree, a nebula in some random universe. Like the uh, the opportunities to imagine are exponential.
Gosh, it is, even saying that. Yeah, I do. Back to sci-fi. I don't know if you ever watched Deep Space Nine.
I've heard of it, but I haven't seen it. I
Oh, definitely see it.
Okay.
It's the best Star Trek. with a black guy as commander.
Okay, I have to watch.
Yeah, it's, and Cisco, the commander, so good, so much dignity. And it's not just, you've replaced a white guy, gung-ho person for black guy, gung-ho person. He's actually got, some kind of dignity, nobility, he's excellent. But anyway, part of the opening sequence is a asteroid, comet, just sort of traveling around, and that would be fantastic to be literally be able to travel through space, and every 100 or so years, like, what was it, 1,000 years, Halley's Comet goes round.
Yeah.
But like, I remember when Hal Bob came around, was visible from the UK, and that was spectacular to be able to see that. But when I first saw that question, I was like, oh crap. It's literally dangerous to my mental health, because it's something I've done so much until recently. I wish I wasn't fat. I wish I wasn't black. I wish I wasn't queer. I wish I wasn't a survivor. All of that, it's really hard to just think, oh, I wish I wasn't fat, because in the next breath, it would go on to, oh, and if I could be lighter skin, that would be great. Or if I could be white, that'd be even better. And if I could, and it just ends up snatching away every single part of myself. And I've worked very hard to just sit with myself and to accept so many parts of myself that are hated, unapologetically hated by society, no matter which part of society, and coming all together as an intersectional person, that I don't need to think like those people do and wish I didn't have this and that and that. That's how I saw the question, but I do also like the idea of being a comic as well.
Yeah, when the first season started, I realized that, because a part of me is like a provocateur. I like in I like to see people's responses to certain questions that aren't necessarily, I guess you could say, it's proper, I guess, within the context of these questions. But then I realized I have to expand this question to, not just in the context of humanity, but in the context of the universe, to be anything, to imagine the self outside of the human construct. And I think that's so much about being queer. So I love your response. I love your response. One of my favorite cartoons is called Adventure Times. It's like one of my favorite shows ever. In one of the season finales, the cartoon kid Finn interacts with the comet, and the comet gives him this is one wish. He said, "You could come with me, and we can go and have like this whole new experience, or you could go back to Earth and live out the rest of your life." And Finn sits there in front of the comet, and he's thinking out loud, and he goes, "You know what? I still have more lessons, more love, more hate,
Oh,
more pancakes, more more relationships, more love, more all these things to experience on that meet reality." So he goes, "I thank you, Comet, for your wish.
oh,
I'm gonna go finish this back down on Earth."
oh,
Um,
that sounds wonderful.
so
I never got into Adventure Time. I was a serious Steven Universe
yes,
fan,
yeah.
big time. Gosh, sorry, I'm just trying to find. I do a lot of crochet, and I've got gosh, where's it gone? A cookie cat and piece of crochet. Ah, here we go.
Oh,
Cookie cat. It's a pet for your tummy. Cookie cat. He's super duper yummy. Cookie cat. He left his family behind. So yeah, I also big Marvel fan. Well, I was. So
Oh,
I've got
Groot.
Groot. I am Groot, or
Oh,
baby Groot. And Director Fury.
okay. I was like, wait, who? I love that. Oh, I love that. It looks, the resemblance to Samuel L. Jackson is spot on.
One I'm really proud of because it's my own design. I couldn't find any patterns.
Oh
And
my,
it's the Valkyrie from Thor Ragnarok.
you are so good at that. That's a talent to crochet and do things with the hands. I don't have that. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with me. Jacq, this is my last question.
Sure.
Is there anything that I didn't touch upon that you really want to express in this moment?
Gosh, there's just so much. I don't know how much time has passed, but it feels like it's only been a couple seconds, really. It's been really easy to talk, and I realize so much is kind of blushed out of me as well. Because, yeah, I'm Billy No Mates right here. I say all these kind of colloquial British words, and I'm not sure if you pick up on Billy No Mates.
I don't know that one, but I picked up on a few of them because I was out there. So I just let it happen. I'm just like, I'll figure out what that means, you know?
Billy, Billy No Mates means just somebody who has no friends, sort of
Oh,
like a sarcastic way of saying someone who's lonely. I actually got a zine, which is you can read for free, about loneliness as well. And yeah, it's in a way it's kind of hard because there's so much crossover with the identities I have. I would have liked to spoken a bit more about fat phobia, and how that intersects with racism and with class and with queerness as well. But there's also loads of stuff about being diabetic and having an eating disorder as well, and being a recovering alcoholic. There's a lot of stuff.
yeah, we could go into that if you want, or you could express, it's up to you. It's up to you. There's so many things.
Mm.
The intersections of the experience are are constantly interacting with, right?
Yeah, and it's a big thing for me because so many people, whether they're professionals or medical people or whatever, or just regular, non-professional people, they just can't seem to comprehend that you can be more than one thing at the same time. I remember wanting to go to a trade union conference. That was before I became the LGBT rep, and I had to ask the chair of the union and where I worked in the university if I could get his note to say Jacq can have paid time off to attend this conference. And he said, you can't be gay, you're Black. Yeah, in all seriousness. And this was a big old man in his 60s saying that to me. And I was just like looking at him and I was petrified. At that time, I was out to a couple of people, but not that many. Sorry.
That was me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it's something that's really, really difficult. Of when I go places and just expect X, Y, and Z, of just being treated decently, or going to a gay pub, in London, the one that's 3 stories high, and being stopped and searched twice,
At the
trying to get in, once to get in and once trying to go upstairs, while white queer people just in and out of like, what's a Black person doing in a gay pub? You can't be Black and gay. You can't be fat and queer. You can't be Black and have dissociative identity disorder. There's a lot of racism in DID communities. It's absolutely disgusting. You can't be You can't have an eating disorder and be a type 2 diabetic. There is no information on the planet about that. And I have looked for like the last 20 years. Since the internet came along, I've been looking. And if you're a type 1 diabetic who uses insulin, then if you have an eating disorder and you go on a binge, for example, you can adjust your insulin when you feel better and things kind of level up. So you're not dangerously high or dangerously low. If you're type 2 diabetic like I am, or have, there's more than 2 types of diabetes. But if you're not on insulin and you have a binge, good luck to you. Ain't nothing you can do, and ain't no help available or even information so you can help yourself. Nothing at all about that. So I really, that's one of my big wishes, is that people can realize that you can have multiple identities at the same time. If the most basic one, I'm a survivor of 20 odd years of sexual abuse and violence, and I can have sex with people now.
Wow.
Yeah,
Oh, yes.
yeah, that you're not completely written off sex for life. And I was for a while. I didn't want to have sex with anybody. But part of healing for me is that I became, very sex positive, and sex positive also includes the choice to be celibate if I want, the choice for that people can be asexual without fear of somebody trying to like prove that they're not in yucky ways or whatever. Sex positive also means the choice to not have sex. I never had that choice before. So, whatever I feel, I try to honor that. But a lot of people, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear that you're a survivor in the first place. It's like, that might happen to white kids or to kids, and that's a terrible thing. But they kind of forget that we grow up and we get older. And yeah, I'm speaking for me, that I have physical and mental fallout from that. Even though the last time it happened was almost 30 years ago, I still have scars, physical scars and things with my body, and a whole heap of mental health stuff because of that. And that doesn't just go. It's something I have to live with. And I'm saying that for myself as well, to kind of remind myself, because it's really easy to internalize the erasure and the hate and the pressure to be over it. Yeah, and I think that's what I want to say. And I'm so glad I was able to have this conversation with you. I really appreciate it.
I thank you. And my hope for this episode, particularly for this episode, is that one, that thank you for sharing your story. I think you have one of the most beautiful, complex, uh, like this multiplicity of experiences that most people would turn away from. But I think I'm grateful that you felt safe enough and open enough to share your story with me. And I hope that folks listen and remember. I think a lot of what you said was about remembering. We have to remember this. This is a reality not only for you, but I'm pretty sure for others. In the UK, in the US, in Jamaica, in Australia, in you know, this this Black experience is
It's worldwide.
it is it's international, and it's a lot. It's a lot. I can't find the proper words. But thank you, Jacq. Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I'm gonna stop our episode right here.
Okay.